always thought family was supposed to be everything. The place you'd always run back to no matter what. That's what I told myself as I stayed in Boston all these years, living just 20 minutes from my parents' house, never really building a life that was just mine. My name is Emily. And if there's one thing I was always sure of, it was that I'd do anything for my family. I grew up bailing my younger brother Mason out of mess after mess. From the time he was a teenager, he was always reckless. Speeding tickets, bar fights, gambling debts that somehow ended up on my credit card. And through it all, my parents would just shake their heads, maybe scold him lightly, then turn to me with these soft, almost grateful eyes. "Thank you for looking after your brother, Emily," my mom would say. "You're the glue that holds us all together," my dad would add. And maybe a part of me needed to hear that. Needed to believe I was the strong one, the dependable one. Even if it meant paying off Mason's $8,000 credit card bill when I was barely scraping by on my own. Even if it meant putting my own dreams on hold, like moving to New York for that publishing job I wanted because they needed me here. I was there for my mom when she had her hip surgery, practically moved back into the house to help her shower, get dressed, drive her to PT. I stayed late at my dad's company doing admin work for free when he was short-staffed. All while Mason was off at another party or another poker game, or posting pictures from some Miami boat trip with his friends. But I kept telling myself, family comes first. That's what good daughters do. What good sisters do. Right? So when it started, the quiet whispers about something going wrong at my dad's company, rumors of an investigation, I didn't think much of it. I assumed it was just gossip. Until one night about 2 months ago, I came by the house to drop off groceries. I walked in through the side door, and that's when I heard my mother's voice, low and urgent, in the kitchen. "Don't worry," she was saying. "She's never said no to family. If this goes to court, she'll protect you. She'll say she did it. That's what big sisters do." For a moment I just stood there frozen, my heart pounding so loud I thought they'd hear it. Then I peeked around the corner. It was my mom, gripping Mason's hand so tight her knuckles were white. Mason was pale, sweaty, eyes darting everywhere like a trapped animal. And suddenly I understood. The fraud. The missing money. The signatures on those strange documents I'd been asked to just sign quickly. It wasn't my father's problem. It was Mason's. And they fully expected me, the loyal, dependable Emily, to take the fall. My stomach dropped. I backed out of the house without them noticing and sat in my car for what felt like hours, shaking so hard my teeth chattered. That night I couldn't sleep. I replayed every memory in my head. Every time I'd paid off Mason's debts, every time my parents praised me for being so selfless, every time I told myself that's just what love looked like. And then I thought, what does love look like when it's only ever one way? The next morning I confronted them. I drove back to my parents' house, hands clammy on the steering wheel, my mind replaying my mother's voice over and over. "She'll say she did it. That's what big sisters do." When I walked in, they were all in the living room. My mom and dad on the couch, Mason pacing like he was ready to bolt. They looked up, startled by how abruptly I entered. I didn't even bother sitting down. "Tell me the truth," I said. "About the fraud. About the investigators. About how you were all planning to have me take the blame." The silence that followed was so thick it felt like it might suffocate me. Finally, my father cleared his throat. "Emily, sit down. You're upset. Let's talk calmly. Answer me." I shouted, my voice cracking. My mom started to cry, big dramatic sobs. "Honey, please. You have to understand, Mason, he made mistakes, yes, but he's young. He has his whole future ahead of him. And I don't." I asked, nearly choking. Mason wouldn't even meet my eyes. He just stared at the carpet. That's when my dad's face hardened. "It's your duty to protect family. We've given you everything, Emily. You've lived under our roof. We helped with your college. You won't refuse us now." It was like every memory of childhood scraped against me all at once. Christmas mornings, birthdays, my mother stroking my hair when I was sick. Was all of that just conditional? As long as I kept being useful? I could barely breathe. "So that's it? You expect me to go to prison for Mason? To just give up my life?" My mother reached for my hand. Her grip was ice cold. "You're strong, sweetheart. You can survive anything. Mason couldn't handle it. Please, for the family." That's when something inside me finally broke. Or maybe it was something that finally healed. because I realized standing there that the love I thought we all shared, it was only ever truly expected from me, not given back. I pulled my hand away. "No," I said. Just one word, but it was like a thunderclap in that room. My mother gasped. Mason finally looked up, eyes wide. My father's face turned an ugly shade of red. "You ungrateful." I walked out, got in my car, and for the first time in my life I drove away from them without looking back. That night I barely slept. I lay awake in my tiny apartment, staring at the ceiling, listening to the hum of the city outside. I kept seeing Mason's terrified eyes, my mother's desperate face, my father's cold fury. But underneath the hurt was a rising, burning clarity. If they wanted a war, I would give them one. The next morning I called a lawyer. Then I called a forensic accountant. Then I called the lead investigator whose card I'd found slipped under my apartment door a week ago. I told them everything. I didn't tiptoe around it. I told the investigators exactly how Mason had used my identity to open fake accounts, how he forged my signature on documents that rerouted money from Dad's clients into shell companies. I handed over everything I had, emails Mason had forwarded me by accident, weird wire transfer receipts, even a set of keys I'd once used to water Mason's plants that also happened to open a locked cabinet in his condo. Inside were flash drives. Dozens of them. When the feds plugged them in, they found offshore banking trails stretching from Boston to Belize. My lawyer helped me file motions to freeze any assets tied to my name, to protect myself legally and financially. Then we moved to freeze a larger set of accounts under suspicion of fraud and laundering. The look on my father's face when he was served with the court order must have been priceless. I wouldn't know I wasn't there. I was too busy meeting with the FBI. In less than 3 weeks, everything exploded. One bright Saturday morning, I was sipping coffee on my tiny balcony when my phone buzzed with a flood of texts from old neighbors. "Emily, FBI is at your parents' place. OMG, they just let Mason out in handcuffs. Are you okay? Do you need anything?" My heart was pounding. I walked inside, sank onto the couch, and actually laughed. It was a raw, broken laugh, half relief, half grief. Because this wasn't how I ever imagined protecting myself. But it was the only way left. By noon, video clips of Mason being let out by agents were all over local Boston news. My mother was captured sobbing on the front steps, makeup smeared, wailing for them not to take her baby. My father tried to shout at reporters, telling them it was all a mistake, that we'd handle it as a family. I wondered if he realized yet. There was no family left to rally around him. That afternoon my doorbell rang. I opened it to see my mother, standing there with swollen eyes. Her hands were twisting the strap of her purse so tightly her knuckles went white. "Emily," she whispered, "you have to help us fix this." For a split second, the little girl inside me wanted to. I wanted to hug her and promise it would all be okay. But that girl was gone, replaced by someone who had learned painfully that love isn't sacrificing your entire life to save people who'd throw you to the wolves. I shook my head. "I did fix it, Mom. For me." She flinched like I'd slapped her. Then she spun on her heel and hurried down the hall, shoulders shaking. I closed the door behind her, rested my forehead against the wood, and let out a shaky breath. Days turned into weeks. Mason was denied bail, flight risk, the judge said. My father's company completely tanked when news of the investigation spread. Partners pulled out. Employees quit. Properties went up for auction. Meanwhile, I moved out of my cramped apartment and bought myself a little cottage near Cape Ann. Nothing fancy, but it had big windows, a quiet stretch of beach, and every morning I woke up to gulls and sea air instead of sirens and dread. And for the first time in my life, every penny I spent was on me. About 3 months later, I was sitting on my porch, a blanket around my shoulders, watching the sun spill gold over the water. It was quiet, except for the tide lapping at the rocks and the occasional distant bark of someone's dog. I felt peaceful. Not happy exactly, but peaceful. Like I was finally learning who I was without the constant tug of family expectations. Then the mail truck rattled up the gravel path. I waved to the driver, took the small stack of envelopes, and sifted through them absently, bills, a flyer for a new diner in town. And then I saw it. A plain white envelope. No return address. My name written in a messy, almost childish scrawl. Mason's handwriting. I went inside, set the other mail on the counter, and sat at my small kitchen table. For a long minute I just stared at it, my heart hammering. Then I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. No greeting, no sign-off. Just a few lines in his sloppy print. I always knew you were weak. Now you've proven it. Family means loyalty above all. Enjoy your lonely life. I read it twice, 3 times, waiting for the sting, for the tears. But there was nothing. Just a faint, distant ache, like pressing on a bruise that had finally started to heal. I folded the letter neatly, dropped it into the trash, and took a deep breath. That night, I walked barefoot down to the shoreline. The sand was cold under my feet, the waves whispering secrets. I stood there for a long time, letting the water swirl around my ankles, and thought about all the things I'd carried for so long. Mason's recklessness, my parents' manipulations, that crushing guilt that had defined my whole existence. I thought about what it meant that Mason believed I was weak, simply because I wouldn't destroy myself for him anymore. And I realized he was wrong. It takes strength to break a cycle that's been strangling you your whole life. I closed my eyes, let the wind tangle my hair, and finally let go of them all. Now my days are simple. I wake up with the sun, walk into town for fresh bread and coffee, work remotely for a small publishing firm that values me purely for my skills, not for how much I can sacrifice. Some evenings I meet neighbors for wine on the porch. Other nights I just curl up with a book by the fire. And sometimes I think about my family, wonder where they are, what they're saying about me. But there's no anger left. Just a hollow space where the hurt used to live. I built this life from the rubble they left behind. It might be small, it might be quiet, but it's mine. Entirely beautifully mine. And that, after everything, is enough.